Joining me right now is my guest. He's Dr. Franklin Ngwu. He is the Director of Public Sector Initiative at the Lagos Business School. Hello, Doctor. Good morning. Good to see you. I haven't seen you in a while. Good morning.
Good morning, Nancy. Good morning, Nigerians. I hope you're well.
I am well. A happy new year in the month of February. This year is already running. So,
Exactly. Greetings from Lagos.
yes, greetings from Abuja too. Is the cost
Thank
of
you.
living squeezing you guys there in Lagos? Because it's really squeezing us here. I'm really so squeezed. Oppressive cost of living.
As at this morning, Lagos is still part of Nigeria, and all the policies causing the cost of living increase, they all affect people living in Lagos. So we are highly squeezed, pressured, worried, concerned, and it's difficult.
How bad is the cost of living crisis, this squeeze? How bad is it? Because I need to ask this question, and why I need to ask this question is that the presidency has said that the cost of living in Nigeria is low. So how bad is this squeeze?
In terms of how, I'm not sure there is any way to describe the extent of how serious the squeeze is. Because if you look at the exponential rise in food prices, that's how you know how bad it is. If you are buying a bag of rice and you're buying it 15,000 before, 20,000 before, it now goes to 70,000, 60,000. And not only that, you buy something today at 10,000, you go back again, they say it's 12,000. The next day is 13,000. So you find out that it's quite difficult for people. And of course, salaries have not really increased. We are still negotiating whether the government will pay minimum wage. We are still negotiating so many things with the government. So the wages are not increasing. Disposable income is going down. Savings is more or less being wiped out. So, and people are pulling their kids out of school. So, and if you leave even Lagos and go to other parts of Nigeria, that's even where you feel the crisis more. So it is very, very bad. It is excruciating, it is sad, and it's something that requires urgent, concerted action from all stakeholders, particularly the federal government, the state government, and the local government.
Mm. Why do you think that the presidency is saying that the cost of living in Nigeria is actually one of the lowest in Africa? Um, let's talk about it statistically. And is the government right if you're saying that? Because we know that some of these things to cascade to other African countries. For example, in Kenya, they're also having it hot. In Ghana, this morning I was listening to a Ghanaian television, and the presenters were saying that, okay, the current vice president wants to run for president. And they're saying, you don't even have the temerity to come here and tell us rubbish. For the fact that you and Nana Akufo-Addo put us into this crisis. You know what's happening actually in Ghana too. The cedis has dropped even lower than Nigeria's. Inflation was at the time over 50% in Ghana. Kenya too, after the removal of subsidy and all of that. So do you think that the federal government, the presidency, Nigeria's presidency, has a point there in saying that Nigeria's cost of living is lower compared to other African countries? Statistically, we deal with facts, so.
I think it is quite regrettable for government to come out at this point to say that the cost of living in Nigeria is low, statistically. But you know why statistics are important, why data is important. We're also human beings, that we can feel the pains and the hardship Nigerians are facing. So as I said before, let me give you an example. If you're buying minimum wage in some places is still about 18,000 or 20-something thousand, as the case may be. But a bag of rice, how much is a bag of rice? How much do you buy tuber of yam? How much do you buy mudu of gari? How much do you buy pint of tomato? And let's assume you have family of 4. How much will it take to feed them in one day? So if the presidency is saying that, of course, the presidency is presidency, there are maybe some of them are excluded from this hardship because of the benefits and privileges of living in Aso Rock or being in the presidency. But anybody, we don't need any data. to say that the cost of living in Nigeria is terrible. We don't need any data. We don't need any comparison because you can feel it. You can see Nigerians. You can connect with Nigerians. And you can even, all of us go to the market and we see what is going on. So if you are a politician or if you are a governor or if you are a senator or if you live in Aso Rock and you don't feel the pains of Nigerians, then it means it's very unfortunate. And it shouldn't even come from the presidency at this point in time to be comparing what is going on in Nigeria with other parts of Africa. Remember, we are called the giant of Africa. So it means that if there are crises in other parts of Africa, Nigeria should be doing better, a lot better. But if you compare Nigeria with even other countries that you are not supposed to compare it with, you find out that we are not doing well at all. In the last report released by, I think, one of these, I think Economist magazine or Financial Times, it was said that some economies in Africa will grow above 7%. And about 8 of them will grow above 7% this year. And Nigeria is, where is Nigeria, the giant of Africa? And it's important that, when you're doing planning, what you ask yourself is, where are we now as a country? Where do we want to go as a country? How do we get there? So if we have, through complete policy failures, lack of policy coordination, failures in governance and leadership, the first thing we are supposed to do is to acknowledge this. And now possibly even explain to Nigerians, possibly apologize, and now call for all stakeholders concerned and commitment, patriotism, to see how you can start addressing some of these issues. Excusing the government and claiming that cost of living is high, or that people are traveling abroad, that's why people are schooling abroad, that's why dollar is going this or doing this, is more or less not really facing the reality. And even the current ways that we are handling it shows that we are just being reactive, not even proactive with regards to the crisis that we are facing. And even if we also ask, how did we even come to this situation? As I said earlier on, it's pure wrong policies, policy failures, lack of coordination, lack of thinking properly in terms of how the policies will affect the ordinary Nigerians.
When the presidency said that, I think it was a response to Atiku Abubakar. And, I looked at the presidency's, that statement saying, okay, Nigeria has the lowest cost of living in Africa. I said they are trying to be smart because I also have the data of the cost of living data in Africa. Of course, I think Senegal has the highest cost of living. So the last data, you have countries like Ethiopia, even South Africa, Ghana, and co. on that list. And Nigeria was not among the top 5. So I was trying to get into the minds of those in the presidency. Was that why they curated or they told Atiku Abubakar that back? But does that also take off the fact that many Nigerians are suffering? Because if you take a look at it historically, data-wise, you just talked about a bag of rice. A bag of rice is going for about 70,000 naira now. I remember when I used to buy a bag of rice for 8,000 naira, and that was just a few years ago. Just a few years ago in this country. And at that time, we're still saying it was high. But now you're buying it at 70K. How much of a risk is this? Even though that the presidency is saying that is the lowest in Africa, the cost of living crisis is low, so we shouldn't be that so worried that the government is doing a lot of stuff to get us back on our feet and all of that. How much of a risk is this rising cost of living?
It is a big risk of exponential dimension. In the sense, of course, that when the cost of living is going up, it's open to so many things. At a point, people might not be able to sustain the existence. Of course, they will start deviating from the norms, from what is expected. So crime rate will go up, insecurity will go up, even factories will start laying off people. And of course, so there will be cyclic negative consequences coming from this. And let me also reiterate that when you say that cost of living is low in Nigeria compared to other African countries, if we want to do a comparison, we shouldn't be selective in the data or the variable that we are using. So we should do a kind of comprehensive assessment analysis in terms of using different variables. If you look at inequality in Nigeria, if you look at unemployment in Nigeria, if you look at inflation,
Poverty.
if you look at crime rate, if you look at insecurity, if you look at so many other variables, there is no way Nigeria is comparing to even other countries in Africa. So it's, as I said, it's unfortunate for us to be saying that cost of living is, I mean, it seems that they live in a different world as compared to what Nigerians are facing. So the consequences are immeasurable because, as I said, it's going to affect everything. So I wanted to buy something, and somebody told me, "Don't I know that dollar has gone up?" And I asked the woman, I said, "Are you also affected by dollar?" And she told me that for her to transport what she's selling from Benin to Lagos, the transport cost has gone up. And when she asked the person transporting her goods, the person said that the diesel has gone up, fuel has gone up, mechanic repairing of the car has gone up, everything has gone up. So it's a cyclic effect. And the woman now adds to what she's selling, and of course, the next person adds to what they're selling. So it doesn't have an end. So it's very important that we realize the imminent crisis that we are facing and see what we can do as a government, as a people, to see how we can start addressing it.
Okay.
And from my own assessment, the government has been a bit very, very reactive. They are not proactive in addressing some of these issues to say, what are we supposed to do? So now we are in February, Nancy. Where is the Minister of Agriculture? Nobody is telling us anything about what they're going to do to even ensure that as we go into rainy season, the agricultural production will increase. What are we doing with regards to manufacturing? So we need clear policies. The ministers are not even talking. Only few of them that we are hearing from them. Most of them, we don't even know them even after how many months of the appointment. So these are things that needs to be done. I think the government is still looking at it. I'm not sure they've appreciated the seriousness of the situation.
Okay, now let's talk about the interventions because that's where you actually ended in terms of what the government is doing, and the government has been reactive and not proactive. If we have the list of the interventions, we can put it on the screen. Of course, we took it earlier. We had the Minister of Information and National Orientation speaking earlier. So the food emergency measures by the federal government, you can see it right now on the screen. The Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security is to release 42,000 metric tons of maize, rice, millet, and gari. That's from the Strategic Food Reserve. 100,000 metric tons of assorted food items to be released from the Strategic Reserve, as well as the stores of the Rice Millers Association. So I think, okay, that's the release will be from the Rice Millers Association as well as the Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security. Then the government is considering, that was quite interesting for me, that the government is considering importation of certain food items, and that perhaps is to, fill the gap as to the shortage. The federal government also said that it will clamp down on food hoarders. We've heard so much about the middlemen, even from President Buhari's days. Then the federal government says it will invest heavily on certain food crops in the upcoming farm season. And the interesting part also, I think I also heard the House of Representatives, the Speaker, yesterday when they were talking about some measures, that it will introduce a bill on emergency food aid. So, Dr. Ngwu, can you comment on some of these measures that you see on your screen right now? And how much of these measures are they even short term? Really, are they short to, that's immediate to medium term? Bearing in mind also that President Buhari, I hope you remember, Dr. Ngwu, President Buhari sometimes ago did order for a release of 40,000 tons of grains from the strategic reserves. So how do you really compare that? Also, that President Tinubu talked about emergency food security, whatever, just a few months ago. So it seems that the government, like you said, is just being reactive, because if President Tinubu had given that order at that time and they sat and they did their work, perhaps the situation will be a bit not too hard on us. I hope you understand what I'm saying, Doctor.
No, I understand you very well. If you look at the the items that you just showed now,
Mm-hmm.
you can see it clearly affirms what I'm saying, that the government is very, very reactive. So it's only one item that is indicating a kind of proactive approach to handling things. The only one there is that the government will invest heavily on food crops in the next farming season. Very interesting, very encouraging, very good. However, that this government came in May last year. And before they came in, they were already aware of the crisis that we are facing in Nigeria. It was that crisis that necessitated some of the reforms that they've announced and they've implemented. So this is not new. And we had May, June, July, August, till now, that's about 9 months. So the question then is, if government is going to invest heavily on food crops, what happened last year? Why didn't the investment start happening last year? That is being proactive to avoid this. We know that this situation is going to come. So if you look at the other ones that are going to release grain, we've been releasing grain in Nigeria. They're going to arrest food holders. They've done it before. And the other items that you listed, these are very reactive measures, as if to say we don't appreciate that these things come and they will come and they will come and they will come. So if the government wants to be proactive, the first thing to do is to, when the new government came in, is to do a kind of scenario analysis. There's something that is called regulatory impact assessment, to assess what happened during PMB's regime and to say what worked well, what didn't work well, what are we going to do differently, and to now do scenarios and say, if we float the Naira, where is it going to end? What are the likely consequences? Should we float it? Should we maintain managed float? Are we ready for floating of the Naira? So this will be, the decision should be made or should be informed, should be based on proper, rigorous analysis and assessment, not just reactive or not just out of courage, which is good, but it's not complete. So what I'm trying to say that what we require from the government at this point in time is that we need a combination of both these reactive measures like releasing of the grain and others, which are very, very, very short term, to now saying what are they going to do in the medium term. Remember that this is even the time that food is supposed to be cheap because we've not gone into the farming season.
Mm-hmm.
So once we go into the farming season, the food prices will definitely go up. So the question then is, what are we going to do between now and the next harvest period? So which we are not seeing from the government. As I said, we are supposed to be seeing the Minister of Agriculture having meetings with all the state governors and saying, let's have a meeting with all the governors and say, let's map Nigeria. Enugu State, you're going to focus on so crops. Abia State, focus on so crop. Plateau, focus on potato. Adamawa, focus on this. Sokoto, focus on this. And you are communicating to Nigerians. In addition to that, you know that for you to do agriculture, you need to secure the environment. With the level of insecurity, how many people will go to the farm? So the next thing is, what reforms, urgent reforms are we going to make sure that the place is secure? If many people are clamoring for state police, if it is going to take a long time, we already have something like a Amotekun in the southwest that is helping. So the question is, what will the government do to support our Amotekun to be more effective and functional? And also, okay, how do we do it in the southeast? How do we do it in the south-south? How do we do it in the north central? How do we do it in northwest and northeast? At least to reduce insecurity, so that farmers can go back to farm and do the right thing. Then you now talk about production. We're supposed to have proper policy being communicated on a daily basis in terms of how we're going to ramp up production to start earning more foreign exchange. So they are supposed to have clear fiscal policies that they're going to use to address some of these issues. Then you now move to monetary policy. And so, we're supposed to see how we can now start earning more. It's very interesting that the central bank has increased interest rates with regards to treasury bills and all that, which is good. At least it will help to mop up money in circulation. But the other policies that we expect, they're supposed to come out and say, what are we going to do with Nigerians in diaspora in terms of how they can help us to bring in more remittances? What are we going to do to attract more dollars, even from non-Nigerians in diaspora? Some banks are already doing it. How are we going to leverage on that more? Okay. So there's so many things that they can do which are supposed to communicate to Nigerians. But what we are not really seeing it. We only hear from CBN governor, we hear from maybe Minister of Finance, but this is supposed to be concerted effort of all the ministers. We've not
Okay.
been hearing from some of them who are very, very relevant to this crisis that we are facing.
Let's talk a bit because I'm actually very invested in what the president or what this committee has said in terms of strategic grain reserves, and we're always finding ourselves in such pitiable, situation, as if we don't remember what we do in this country. But let me also remind the government, because you said something that was also very instructive, that we don't really hear enough from the Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security. Before, during Buhari, it was rural development. Now, I think in 2018, we have 33 silos in the country that has a capacity of 1.3 million metric tons. In 2018, some of the silos were concessioned. And we also know that in this country, that that is silos, I think, in Akure, Bonyi, and some other silos were concessioned. We don't know as to the state of those silos now. That's one. Number two is that, is that still in this country, we have a capacity, our silos have a capacity of 1.3 million metric tons. But there's never been a time in this country that we have full capacity for our silos, just like about 500,000. So I'm wondering where the government is. They are in government, so whether they see things that we don't see. But we also know that things happen in this country, that the government, the Federal Executive Council in 2018 did that. So how much communication and information do we need from government officials as to their being forthright with Nigerians? Because in 2023, the president said let them release grains. Buhari said that also just before he left, let them release grains. In fact, President Buhari almost emptied our grain reserves, So now President Tinubu is saying the same thing. So I'm really wondering where all of this is coming from, if the government is not even confused itself.
Nancy, let me very interesting question that you asked. So let me start by saying that I think Indonesia made about $22 billion or $21 billion from only palm oil, I think in 2022 or 2021. So I'm talking about just one product, 20-something billion dollars in 1 year. Interestingly, from what you showed, the federal government is trying to import foods into Nigeria. And this is a country with unimaginable blessings and endowment. So, giant of Africa importing foods. So what it means is that if we are serious as a country, there is no basis why we should be having this crisis. So I'm reading one book. I read it. I'm trying to read it again. It's called Development as Attitude, written by Professor Osita Ogbu. Very interesting book. And it's talking about that what moves a nation is the attitude of the leaders. So I think it's a book I will recommend for our leaders to go through, among other books, in terms of how they can govern the country. But we shouldn't be in this crisis at all. So whether they are seeing it or they are not seeing it, they live in Nigeria. And these are realities. But I think that it's important that, if a child is crying and crying and you don't look after why the child is crying, at a point in time, the cry will be so high that you, the adult, might not even be able to sleep. And we are getting to that point in Nigeria. So it is very, very important that the government sits back, federal, state, local government, and change their attitude, disposition, and approach to governance in Nigeria. It is not working, and it cannot work with this approach that we are using, because things are really getting out of hand. People are suffering, people are dying, insecurity is increasing, all negative outcomes, we are observing it in Nigeria. So we need to change our attitude to governance.
Now, let's take a look at another side of it, which is, I don't know if you saw decisions from the courts just a few days ago to fix and regulate prices of milk, flour, asking the federal government to do that. On the other hand, the government of Niger State came out to ban, say, food wholesales. Also buttressing the fact of what the federal government is saying in terms of people are hoarding and that they will clamp down on them. So how does the federal government really take a look at this issue? Because there is market forces too. So I also know, I think there's a Price Control Act, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So how do we balance this? That things are going out of hand. The court has told the federal government, regulate these prices, but the markets are saying something different. And Niger State governor is also saying things different, things that same way. Also, just a few weeks ago, also, that the federal government talked about the prices of medicines, drugs. You know, if you, for those people that need drugs on a daily basis to, you know, to survive, you will know that the prices of medicines have also skyrocketed. So how do we juxtapose all of this? Can the federal government really do this?
Um, I think, Nancy, that the main responsibility of a government is to advance the welfare of the citizens. But let me start with the one from Niger State. It's quite very, very unfortunate that the governor of Niger State is talking like this. If you remember, if you know the land size of Niger State, you know that Nigeria is supposed to be begging Niger in terms of what they can produce. The fertile land that they have, everything that they have, as the case may be. I know people from Niger State, and they are saying that if the government do what they are supposed to do, Niger State should be the food basket of the country. So if Niger State, for example, decides, the governor decides today to say he is going to plant 10 million economic trees in Niger State, that will give Niger State about 300 billion in 1 year after 3 years. If Niger State can afford 300 billion from one economic tree, it means that all this that we are saying will just disappear. Remember that beans, another crop, takes about 3 months to work. So if Niger State decide and say, okay, we are going to focus on grains, for example, it means that some of these things, so it's unfortunate for the government to come and say that we are banning wholesale food, for court to now say federal government to decide to clamp on this. I mean, these are signs of failing of failed governance. I mean, how can you, in this current climate, in this current dispensation, that you are saying that you should ban wholesale food sales, you should ban this one, you should ban this one. Rather, what governor should do is to sit back and see how we can make sure that Niger State becomes the food basket of the country. Work with the federal government and say, how do we provide proper security? Not when we are hearing that many local governments in Niger State are controlled by bandits, and he's now coming out to say, oh, we are banning wholesale food prices, as the case may be. It is time that we are supposed to start questioning, really questioning the capability and the disposition of our leaders in terms of their ability to actually appreciate the reality of the situation. If a government is not able to provide what they're supposed to provide in terms of security, in terms of welfare of the citizens, it means that the government is not fit for the responsibility to which they've been elected to do. So it is important that we start looking at these issues. I mean, if the court can say, but of course the market determines food prices. If they're saying that people are hoarding food, what kind of food will you even hoard? Are you hoarding rice or beans or grain or yam or potato or vegetable? Or which one are they saying that people are hoarding? So if people are hoarding rice or grains, would they be able to hoard vegetable? Or is the price of vegetable lower than price of grains? What of yam? Will you be able to hoard yam? Will you be able to hoard granite?
So
I mean, these are realities that we are supposed to be facing as a country and get serious with it to address some of these challenges.
Okay, doctor, let me take you on another issue that is very interesting and we hardly talk about it. And let me raise it, which is the issue of shrinkflation. Those of you that are economists, you understand what I'm saying. The issue of shrinkflation, when you're paying more for less in terms of the product that you're buying, the quantity of the product has reduced. There's also skimflation, where the quality of the product has reduced, but you are still paying the same. There's another concept called excuseflation, which is that the companies are blaming inflation for increasing their prices. So if you take a look at these three, shrinkflation, skimflation, excluseflation, they are all in this country right now. How do we address this? Because there's the issue of inflation. There's the issue of food inflation. There's the issue of shrinkflation. How do we address it? You go to a supermarket now, you take a product, you will realize that the quantity of that product is not up to it used to be. People in this country, 50 kg bag of rice is no longer 50 kg. If you measure it, some comes out 35 kg or 40 kg. Will the federal government also control this? So how do we really, because how do we balance? Let me give you an example. And I made an example some time ago. I was given a Christmas hamper and a custard bucket, a custard can, that is it 1 kg or so, was there. Doctor, the custard container was this big, the custard powder was this very small. And I wanted to call the company out, but they did very brilliantly. They didn't put their number there, and I would have called them out. So, what should also be the responsibility of Nigerians when we notice this thing, as well as the agencies like, is it Standard Organization of Nigeria, which other agency, FCCPC, which other agency, in all of this. So, how do we address those concepts that are already existing?
Thank you very much, Nancy. But of course, you know that when you find yourself in certain situations, people, firms will start behaving in certain ways to keep afloat. So I think our focus, why the agencies like SON, like Consumer Protection Agency, CPC, and all that should continue to do their work. However, the main problem is not about these different components or these different types of inflation. The main problem is in the macro policies to drive productivity. The main problem is in the macro policy to tame inflation in terms of monetary policy and fiscal policy to tame inflation. So if things are fine, there's no reason why a company will be reducing the quantity of the products. Remember that I know some companies who are saying that what they are producing is price sensitive. So once you increase the price of what they are selling, it's going to affect the demand. It's going to affect their revenue. It's going to affect their people that they're employing, as the case may be. So what do they have to do? They are trying to maintain the same price, but see how they can, adjust either the quantity, the packaging, or the cost of, just to reduce the cost of production to still maintain the price. So our focus should be in terms of how do we increase output? And then how do we tame money in circulation so there will be not too much money in circulation? How do we ensure that we pay the reasonable wage to people to be able to afford?
Yeah.
Those are the key policies that we're supposed to be focusing. Whether it's shrink inflation or excuse inflation or this one inflation, these are consequences.
Or confuse inflation.
Or even there are different types of inflation. Yeah. These are just consequences of a failing society.
Okay.
Or a failing economic policies. Okay. So our focus should be on coming together to say, what are the policies that we're supposed to do? So the government has started with some reforms. So they've removed subsidy. They've now floated Naira. It seems that maybe because the floating of Naira hasn't really worked well, maybe the government is not even following through some of the reforms they're supposed to pursue. Okay. They're supposed to ask and say, this floating of Naira, has it worked? If it hasn't worked, we have to change it and say, we cannot continue like this. But they also have to pursue it with other reforms to make sure that we achieve what we want to achieve as a country.
Okay, Doctor, I think we will leave it at that. There are so many layers to this conversation, but I guess we'll continue on another day because there's also the issue of living wage or minimum wage as it concerns this cost of living crisis. But many thanks for joining us today. Have a wonderful day.